So we're back this week with SoCal Business and Basketball Report for the last week of the season. This is Ray Dietz, and we're here at Venice Beach this week. The scene from the 1992 movie White Men Can't Jump, where Billy Hull and Sidney Dean were hustling people on the basketball court. It's kind of like The Color of Money in the pool halls, but only on a basketball court. And so we're here this week to kind of talk about some guys that made it to the NBA, some things, maybe some guys that didn't, and give you some insights and hope that the message gets back to some younger players to help them and reaching their goals in the end. The younger players today don't play on the playgrounds as much as they used to because really they don't want to get hurt. But when I was a kid, I was always out on the outdoor courts, pretending like I was Magic Johnson or Pooh Richardson, Jay Burson, Ronnie Stokes, these kind of guys that I grew up watching. And so it's a different scene today. Guys are playing the indoor courts on the wood floors and protecting their bodies a lot more. The best player that I saw growing up, and after me in my area, was LeBron James, and James Posey came from my area. But as I was growing up, I was in the 8th grade when Dave Jamerson was a senior at Stowe High School, and he went on and played at Ohio University. He was a first-round draft pick by the Houston Rockets, and as he was growing up, his dad had played in college, and whether they were playing pickup ball on the outdoor courts at Lions Park in Cuyahoga Falls or at the Annex Gymnasium at Kent State University, his dad absolutely killed him. For every little thing that he did, he was all over him. And it kind of desensitized him. I'm not saying it's the way that I would do it or will do it, but with Dave Jamerson, it really desensitized him, I think, as he went on to college. I mean, the guy could take a couple dribbles past half court and pull up, and he had no fear. He would usually make it, number one, but number two, if the coach or his teammates got on him, it didn't faze him, and made him a first-round draft pick. He was a very good player. So, you know, that's one of the things that you see some former players might handle it because you got to have a steel gut when it comes to basketball. You'll know your weaknesses, whether it's strength, your handle, your shot, your leaping ability, and you're going to work on those things. But you got to have, if you're a normal guy, and the reason I bring up Dave Jamerson initially, he's a guy like me and you, okay? He wasn't a freak athlete, didn't get his elbows over the rim, and so you're going to have to outwork people. Another guy that wasn't necessarily a freak athlete, Ken the Mouse McFadden, played at Cleveland State University, and if you recall, he took his team, Cleveland State, further than Cleveland State's ever gone. They lost in the Sweet 16 round to Navy and David Robinson, but as Ken was coming out of college, he'd tell you his first year he just didn't have it. He wasn't up mentally, physically, etc. So he would tell you, he'd admit he didn't deserve it. His second year out of college, he was right there in the hunt and making the team with the Philadelphia 76ers. And he was peak shape mentally, physically, playing really well. And the owner of the Sixers came out to watch a game with Charles Barkley, brought Barkley along, and there were two teams playing. This is a tryout for the Sixers, and the head coaches for these two teams were the assistant coaches for the Sixers. So before the game that I'm talking about, the assistant coach, who's the head coach of the team that Ken's on, tells them, hey, my point guards don't shoot the ball. So they go out and play the game, and about 3/4 through the game, the owner comes out of the stands and comes down yelling at Ken and tells him, I brought Charles here to watch you play in particular, and you won't shoot the ball. Well, Ken, he said, why don't you shoot? Ken immediately pointed to the the coach of the team that he was on, said he told me not to shoot. Okay, so the point being here, what ended up happening, that assistant coach, he had a guy that he was friends with that was in the game, and he was trying to help that guy make the team. And I'm not going to mention the names, but that disruption there kind of blew it up for Ken. And that other guy that I referred to, the assistant coach was trying to help, he did make the team. So that Ken would tell you just kind of hit him in the gut. And so after that, he was done. He didn't try out his third year out, and really impacted him. So I'm not saying I would have been any different. I didn't have the skills that Ken McFadden had. But if you're gonna make it and you're a regular guy, you got to have a steel gut. And most people in that situation would have been awfully tough, because Ken was deserving. He should have made that team, and he was better, but he ended up not making the team because of politics. So that gives you an example, and the thing I want to hammer home here is really you got to have a steel gut. And with the Jamerson example, you could yell him upside and down, and nothing was going to phase him. And he had that background growing up that his dad gave him. So from here, I wanted to bring up a story when I was at Villanova, and in the preseason we had to run a 5:30 mile if you were a guard. And so I worked up in the preseason. I came in at 5:25, and it was everything that I could do. I mean, it was to where when I finished that mile, I died, laid out on the infield of the track, hacking up a lung. It took me, I had to, walking back to the dorm, I had to stop 4 times and catch my breath. It was to where I could kind of see how these guys in football die in the preseason. I mean, I felt like I was almost right there. Well, Kerry Kittles was on the team, and it was like he was shot out of a cannon. He almost lapped our main group that came in at like 5:25, and Kerry came in at 4:30. And I don't think he had any training in the field of track, and maybe his arms weren't held right, but he was just shot out of a cannon. He was a freak of nature athletically in his lungs. I heard that Allen Iverson was the same way. So there's going to be some guys that just naturally get their elbow up above the rim, their lungs, their strength, they're going to come back from an ACL injury in a couple months. Garrison Hurst, the old running back from Georgia, he played his career in college basically without an ACL, and they found it in the combine, in the NFL combine. It took me about 8 months to rehab from an ACL tear. So there's some people that are just going to be a freak of nature. James Harden was a guy that I saw in high school, and he was not a freak athlete. He was very skilled, but he just kept working on it. He was a good athlete, and he just kept improving through the years. He just kept working on it. Take a guy like Jerome Lane, who went to St. Vincent St. Mary High School in Akron, where LeBron James went to school. He was a good athlete, not extremely tall, about 6'6", and Jerome got over to Pitt and played his first year, and Paul Evans came in and said, look, you need to rebound, and that's it. Just focus on rebounding. So the team needed it. The team needed the rebounding. They had Charles Smith at center, and they had a bunch of guys back then, but Jerome took those words seriously, and he went out. He became the leading rebounder in the entire country. And it got him to the NBA. He got a few years in the NBA with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Denver Nuggets. I saw LeBron James when he was in high school as an underclassman, and he had some gifts certainly. But Keith Dambrod, who's the current coach at Duquesne, spotted him in the 8th grade at JCC in Akron, and coached him for a couple years. I think he helped LeBron quite a bit, and you'd see LeBron always made the right play. They post him up, he catches a lob pass in the post, 5 guys collapse on him, he does a tip pass to Drew Joyce under the bucket, little 5'5" Drew Joyce for a wide open layup. So he just had those instincts as well. So I want to give you a feel for lots of different ways that guys make it. Lance Miller was a guy that I played with at Villanova, and I felt after his junior year he would have been drafted, maybe in the 2nd round, maybe in the late 1st round. And we had a coaching change. The new coach was real cool with everybody in the spring, and then came the first day of school, and he called us into the locker room, and he told us, hey, let's get the first thing straight. I own you guys. Let me correct myself. I effing own you guys. And everyone's kind of looking around the room, and there were a number of seniors on the team. And the coach lost the team right there. We went out and won 8 games, and with that, Lance was not going to get drafted. He played in Europe, but so I think maybe a lesson there. Strike while the iron is hot. And you see, back then, guys just didn't go pro after their freshman year. But if you have some kind of a guarantee, I would recommend striking while the iron is hot. From there, I want to talk about a couple other guys. David Nwuba was a guy locally from Los Angeles here, didn't play at Fairfax, didn't play at Westchester, and his coaches knew he had the athleticism, but his opportunity at that time was a junior college coming out of high school. He went to Santa Monica College and moved on from there. He went to Cal Poly and did well. And so how can you create an opportunity? Well, this is just me talking, no one else, but sometimes teams in the NBA are trying to tank. He got a call from the Lakers and played for it was the D League at that time. And then they put him on the roster at the end of the year, and I think people started to see that what his high school coaches knew is that he had the athleticism, and he ended up getting a contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And let's see here, I don't have the amount on that one. So there's a D-League example. Zion Williamson this year, I'd say college helped him. I don't think everyone knew who the best player was in the country coming into this year. About 10 games in, I think we all know who that is. How about Keon Dooling from Missouri, played at the University of Missouri. I remember he was with the Clippers, and there was an assistant coach for the Clippers in his first few years. Told him, you're not going to be an NBA player. You're just not going to be there. Well, he had mental toughness, and Keon Dooling played 13 years in the NBA. So that steel gut, you got to kind of let it go in one year and out the other. I and many other people, I think, would kind of hang on to every word the coach would say, and that's not going to be good for you long term. You really got to have that steel gut. Let's look at some other examples here. I want to talk a little bit about T.J. McConnell. Okay, another guy. Maybe again, just me talking. No one else saying this. But let's say that the Sixers are tanking. Okay, so they bring McConnell in. He scraps, he claws, he gets some experience, and then a little while later. There's other teams asking about him. They like his scrappiness out there. And when you're in demand, you're going to have the opportunity to stay in the league. He currently has a $1.6 million contract. How about Norman Powell, one of my favorite stories from UCLA and originally from the San Diego area. Norman comes in, looks good as a freshman. I liked it. At that time, UCLA was playing down at the sports arenas. They were redoing Pauley Pavilion, and I liked his play. The next year they bring in Zach LaVine. Whether they're looking to take his place or what have you. It's always going to be that way in the NBA and college. They're looking to find someone better, but Levine could jump out of the gym, and you had Norman had to kind of take a back seat. Well, he hung in there, became a 4-year guy, and he ended up with Toronto. He has a 4-year, $41.9 million contract. So there's a great success story. How about John Brockman? This is a unique situation. He was the best power forward on the West Coast when he's coming out of the state of Washington. Snohomish High School in Washington. Well, UCLA is recruiting him. He decides to go to the University of Washington, ended up leading Washington and rebounding in his career. Got a few years in the NBA, and UCLA ended up going with a guy by the name of Luke Richard and Bamute. And he, kind of kept his mouth shut. He had a motor, played defense, he rebounded. It worked well with Ben Howland's style of play. And he got an opportunity with the Milwaukee Bucks. And Scott Skiles was the coach. Scott Skiles absolutely loved him. He loved his defense. And that led to, he's over 10 years in the NBA right now, and he's still playing. So ended up that he actually helped UCLA more than Brockman would have. And so sometimes you kind of drop the chocolate in the peanut butter and things work out a little bit. How about Danny Green? He's friends with LeBron James and gets an opportunity there in Cleveland. It's time to move on. He by the skin of his teeth, he gets an opportunity with the San Antonio Spurs and takes Popovich's coaching, and he ends up within a skin of his teeth of being the MVP of the finals. He really did well. Joe Harris in there with LeBron James as well, and for a couple years, time to move on. The Nets pick him up. He wins the NBA three-point shooting contest. How about Matthew Dellavedova? Stronger than everyone in his conference, doesn't have the skills to play in the NBA, but he makes his skill, hustle, scrappiness, and giving it his all, ends up getting a contract with the Milwaukee Bucks. So, there's lots of ways to make it, but to kind of organize it, I think number one, you got to have that steel gut. You got in one ear and out the other, okay? And having those instincts of knowing who to listen to, who not to. And don't hang on to every word of that coach, okay? So a lot of them are crazy. They've got issues. So their whole thing is to get results, and their whole thing is to get you to do something that another coach would not, because that's what makes them valuable. Know your strengths and bolster your strengths, and know what your weaknesses are and improve upon them. And in the end, you got to find someone that believes in you. You got, whether it's Scott Skiles, LeBron, Paul Evans, it's probably going to be someone that you complement their personality, and maybe you showcase that fire that they have, or your poise is something that they admire, because that's what they like. So that gives you some examples of guys that made it, some that didn't, and there's no right or wrong. You gotta go for what you want and find your opportunity. And that pretty much wraps it up for the year. We've gone through some historical guys here that made it to the league. We talked about some of tomorrow's stars right here in LA, and the best guys don't always make it, and some of the guys that are on back do. So it's fun for me to watch that through the years. Just a couple of final things for the year here for my clients out there. Please don't send your tax stuff in the last week of the tax season if you can get that in early. And don't send those IRA contributions on April 14th, the last day. That makes it tough. If you have the opportunity to take HSA health insurance, let's talk about that, because that can really help you tax-wise. And for small companies and nonprofits, if you want to talk about your retirement plan, your group health insurance, there's some things that can really help you tax-wise there, and the rest of the year I'm happy to do that. And finally, when I moved to LA, David Wu told me if you would read the LA Times cover to cover for 1 year, you're going to know what's going on in LA. And so I did that for several years, still read it today, and I hope that people over the last couple of years that have watched this show have a good grasp of not only LA but Southern California and California. And we'll continue to bring you some information. I'll pop in this summer for you, and that's pretty much it here. If you haven't seen all the shows, a couple of people told me they've been doing some binge watching on the weekend, so check out those old episodes and you can learn about all the areas in California and hear about our best players that are coming to be tomorrow's stars. So that's it. Take care, and I got to meet up with Billy and Sydney at Sizzler here, so have yourself a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.